The final part of the today's lecture will be on the application. Right? So what can you do by using a graph, except besides the traversal methods that we have introduced previously? This particular application, which we call it the derivation of the topological ordering, is a very straightforward usage of the graph in trying to model the dependency relationship. And the way it works is as follows, right? So if you have, for example, a node A and then a node B, and you have H connecting from A to B, this is directional, right? Then what we can interpret out of this particular relationship is that from B's perspective, A actually is leading into B, right? So we can actually say that B depends on A, because you have to, if you view individual vertices as the task, it's as if you have to finish the task A before you move on to task B. So this is a form of the dependency. So for example, you can model the dependency of courses in SMU as a graph. You can model, for example, the manufacturing task in a factory. If a particular, let's say, product require multiple steps to be performed, then you can actually say that, I mean, one task need to be followed by another task, right? So again, that potentially complicated relationship can be covered and can be captured by using a graph. Or it can be a causal relationship, indicating that one event may lead to another event. So one thing to keep in mind is that if you intend to use the graph for the purpose of capturing the relationship, dependency relationship, you can never have cycle. And this is one example, right? You can see that B depends on A, and then C depends on B, but again, A depends on C, right? So this particular cycle means that you will never be able to begin the satisfaction of individual tasks of either A or B and C, because they need to be simultaneously presented. So in this way, we basically will never be able to finish this dependency requirement. So one of the very important things as a result over here is that if we want to use the graph for the purpose of capturing the dependency, you should have a graph that contains no cycle. This is what we mean by having a graph that's directed, but acyclic. Acyclic over here basically means that there's no cycle in the graph. So if you compare this graph to the very similar, actually, all the vertices and the connections look very similar or almost identical to the previous case, but you see that we did remove certain edges to make sure that there's no cycle, right? So if you look at this particular diagram over here, there's no cycle inside the graph itself. Okay, so with this particular graph, then we can define a topological ordering. So topological ordering essentially refers to a sequence or a permutation of vertices in the graph such that all the edges will be pointing forward. It's pointing forward because if you carry out your computation or your execution of the task from the left-hand side, everything that you need in the downstream will be finished, always finished the first, because all the edges are pointing forward. Okay, so this is another way to say it, right? So if you look at it, if you look at all the edges in the graph, if you ensure that you can come up with a sequence that always point forward, then the source vertex will always be executed before the target vertex. This is how you can then ensure that you never violate the dependency relationship. And this is one of very important property of any DAG, any directed acyclic graph. If you have any graph that's directed and acyclic, then we should be able to find out at least one topological ordering. Potentially, you can have more more than one, but you have at least one. Right, so with this particular topological ordering, by applying that to the previous three examples that we talk about, you can, for example, you can use the graph to capture the dependency or the prerequisite requirement of all the courses in SMU. If you do that, you can actually find a particular schedule of the courses that you can take in different semesters so that all the prerequisite requirement can be satisfied. Or if you use graph for the purpose of scheduling tasks, again, this topological ordering will make sure that you never violate the prerequisite relationship. And the chain of events also goes as follows. So let's look at some graphical example directly. This is taken from the book that's over here. This is one of our reference book. So if you look at it, this is one of the DAG. This is the original format of the directed acyclic graph. Again, you can check carefully to make sure that it doesn't contain any cycle. If that is the case, you can actually generate a permutation, right? So in this case, you can see that there are two potential permutations. They are not exactly the same, but they have a common property, which is the fact that all the edges are pointing forward, right? So again, reiterating the principle that we talked about in the previous slides, if you treat this as the sequence of execution, you do it from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, you cross out the vertex to indicate that this particular vertex has been executed. If you do it from the left-hand side gradually to the right-hand side, then you can ensure that by the moment you reach a particular vertex that require anything from the left-hand side, this particular node can always be satisfied because everything to the left-hand side has been finished already, right? So you'll never violate the prerequisite relationship if you generate a particular sequence such that all the edges are pointing forward. The sequence that's down here slightly different from the sequence above, but again, it shares exactly the same principle. All the edges are pointing forward. So this is one example where you have one DAG, but you have multiple sequences that satisfy the requirement for topological orders. So how do we derive that? The process in which we can derive the topological orders is called topological sorting. Okay, so the intuition is actually very simple. We try to follow a path to as deep as we can until we cannot go any further. So all the vertices along this particular path should actually appear in sequence. Okay, but one of the difficulties is that, okay, so there are some vertices potentially may be branching out, right? So how do we deal with that? So idea over here is that, okay, to generate a path, we can use DFS, but we can separately use another data structure like stack to keep track of the nodes where you have run out of options, right? So by doing so, what you do is that you can actually keep track of, always make sure that you keep track of the nodes that only when a particular vertex has been completed and it doesn't have any node that you can visit any further, that's the only time that you're going to put into the topological ordering stack, right? So that is the mark of the termination of the further exploration. Okay, so let's look at the pseudocode over here, right? This is the top level method. You can see that the stack over here, this is what we call the TO stack, the stack used to store the topological order, right? And we try out all the possible nodes that has not been visited yet. If the node has not been visited yet, we will try to start a DFS from that particular node. And stack is being pushing, is being passing to make sure that we actually capture the visitation of all the vertices along the path while we are doing the depth first search traversal. And the lower level method, this is essentially the recursive version of the DFS. The only thing different is this particular line over here, right? So we will always push the vertex into the stack when we are done with the DFS exploration. That means that if we cannot perform any further exploration from the current vertex, then we'll push that particular vertex into the stack, right? So that ensures that at the moment when the vertex is being pushing into the stack, all the vertices depending on that particular vertex should already be inside the stack because you have made the recursive call already. Okay, so let's look at one example. This is the example that we begin our discussion with. This is a DAG. Let's see how we can execute the topological sort. Right, so again, this particular method is pretty flexible. You can begin your topological sorting from any potential node. The following example actually start from the node A, and later we'll try another starting vertex. It will generate the same results. All right, so this is the case where we start from A. So we try to execute the DFS first. This is exactly the same kind of tracing that we have done previously in our example. So we start from A. You look at the next node, you can go B or C. We start with B because B is earlier in the alphabetical order. So again, over here, you can see that on the graph, we directly mark the node that has been visited. So we will not visit that accidentally for the second time. So from B, you can go to C. From C, you can go to D. From D, you can go to F. And this is the end of this particular path. So you can see that from F, because you cannot go anywhere, there's no alternative path you can divert to. This is the time that you put it into the TO stack. So now you are back to D over here, right? So at the D over here, you will try to do exploration. There's no other alternative path. So again, you cross it, you push it into the TO stack. Now you're back to C. Again, you do a very similar check. Can you do another branching out to other paths? You cannot. So you put that into the TO stack. From B, you can actually go to E, right? So you actually branch out. But from E, again, you cannot go anywhere. So you will push node E into the TO stack. And then now you're back to B. Right? So now really you run out of option at B. So B is been pushing. And finally, A is been pushing. So when you want to check, then this is the topological order. Right, from A, B, E, C, D, F. You pop the node one by one. So this is the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So later we will do a check. But before we do that, let's do a slightly different starting policy. So now we can try to start from C. So if you start your depth first search from C, it will not cover the whole graph. But again, topological sorting must cover all the nodes, right? So later we'll see how we deal with that. Okay, so let's start with C. Again, C is visited. From C, you can go to D. From D, you can go to F, right? So you can begin to backtrack. From F, cannot go anywhere. So you push it into the TO stack. You backtrack to D again over here. D doesn't have any alternative. So again, you push that into the TO stack. Finally, you are back to C, right? Also, you have no options, so you push it into the stack. But you don't just terminate it here, right? Because remember, the top level topological sorting need to ensure that for each and every vertices, you have included that into the TO stack. Right, so now you are done with CDF. You have to restart you have to try to start another DFS from other nodes. For example, you can start from A. From A, you can go to B, right? So again, over here, also you have the option of C, but C has been visited in the previous node. So you also will not repeat that. So from A, you can go to B. From B, again, no options. You can go C, you can go D, but both are already explored, already visited in the previous DFS. So only option is go to E, right? So again, you run out of option once you reach E, so you begin to backtrack, and right before you backtrack, you push that into the TO stack, start from E, you backtrack to B. Again, at the B B, you run out of options. So you backtrack to A, and finally you push A into the TO stack. So if you look at the two options over here, this particular sequence and the sequence on the previous slides, they should look exactly the same. Okay, so let's do a confirmation, right? So you push, you pop out all the elements from the TO stack. Then this is the sequence of the topological order, right? So we can try to validate the this particular sequence by beginning to write or draw the edges between all pairs inside this particular horizontal view of the edges sequence, right? We start from A, right? From A, you can connect to B and C, right? So they are all pointing forward, right? So this is correct. From B, you can connect to C, D, and E, right? So again, you just draw the all the edges, and from the next node over here, right? From C, you can connect to D, and from D, you can connect to F, right? And then from E, you can connect to D, right? And from F, again, F is the last node, so nowhere to connect to. So now you are done, right, with the processing. You essentially just work down the agency list, right, to make sure that everything in the agency list is being replotted down here, right? And then the only thing you have to check is that whether or not all the edges are pointing forward. If that is the case, then you are good, right? You don't have to do anything. Okay, so this is the topological sorting process. So let's do one exercise, right? So this is topological sorting. So again, pause a bit after you finish this video and just do this particular exercise. We will go over the solution of this in a separate video. Okay, so remember to actually just perform this particular exercise before you move on to the solution video. And this is very important, right? Make sure you do it so you know actually how to solve this kind of problem, right? Finally, is the summary, right? So again, today we introduce the representation of the graph, the definition of two different type of graph. The first is directed, the second is undirected, right? What does it mean in terms of the graph representation? We introduced two important traversal methods, depth versus DFS and breadth versus BFS. Finally, we'll introduce one algorithm that have a very important application in the area of modeling the dependency relationship. How can you use topological sorting to actually derive a sequence that will never violate the prerequisite relationship? Okay, so we'll stop here. We will review the solution in a short while.